Took my test this afternoon. Got 100.
You cheat. It's the only way to do it.
Keep going back.
Actually, you just go down and hit every answer and eventually it'll clear you.
Well, but then I had to print and I
What?
had. We're recording.
We're still waiting for Jeremy.
Did you get on the Wi-Fi?
I'm in the system.
Actually, with COVID, I'm going to take it again.
Okay.
Just time flies,
Not yet.
having a good time.
Yes.
Okay,
So I
I
had to
made
do
you
it twice. I had to
co-host,
get through the second
Okay.
time.
just in
so
case
that I
something
could
happens, because when we were at
print
the
mine.
public safety, I made you fill
That's
it,
the
so I
toughest
lost all
part.
control,
I
I struggle with.
Yeah,
Particularly if you need multiple copies.
so there. We've got Christine.
You have to change the way it's gonna print out, which it'll let you do, but.
Christine, you look all fancy for your meeting.
Oh, God, no, I'm just sitting in my car waiting for the city council meeting to begin at 8. So, how is everyone?
Doing fine.
Good, how are you?
All right, so we can,
Okay, and then what I can do is I can leave this little thing up in the corner if everybody wants, and then you can,
I was gonna say, because I
you
think,
can see who comes and goes.
yeah, that's good.
You wanna do that?
Yeah, that's fine. Now, if Amanda pops in, I can make. I
You can just make
promote
her
right?
panelist,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, all right, sounds good. Okay.
Okay, so you're going, I'm gonna continue to work.
Okay, well, yeah, if you.
Yep.
That's fine. Okay, all right. Okay, so we will start this warrant committee meeting for September 13th. And then when Jeremy and Amanda arrive, they can join in. So we will, so here present is Jill, Bob, Ed, myself, Stephen, and Newton, and Christine is participating remotely.
You gotta give her a full name as a remote participant.
There you go. Do you want to, did you hear that, Christine?
No, I didn't hear. Christine Barton, did you want me to say my full name?
Yes, I wanted you to say your full name and that you're participating remotely.
This is Christine Barton. I am participating remotely.
Okay. And then we also have with us Mark Sorrell. So we're going to start the meeting with just a brief overview of the ethics law and a couple of updates on that, and then we will kind of jump into the rest of our agenda. If that works for everybody, so that way Mark doesn't have to stay with us all night unless he really feels the need to.
I have another meeting that I want to get into.
I
Okay,
need him to go to the planning board, so.
all right, so we're gonna jump right in.
All right, so I've given you a summary of the ethics law, which highlights the important sections. The first thing you need to understand about the ethics law is, it's ethics. It's a criminal statute, so it needs to be taken seriously. It deals with fairly obvious substantial conflicts of interest, obvious dealing, self-dealing, those types of things, and then there's more subtle appearance-like things as well. So it's General Laws, Chapter 268A. It's administered by the State Ethics Commission. They have regulations as well. The most significant of their regulations, if you go on their website, is they have fleshed out some of these areas that are unclear. They also have authority to create exemptions to situations that would otherwise raise conflicts under the statute, and they have done that, and there is a list of those exemptions in the regulations. The other thing to emphasize, well, there's several things. First of all, it applies, there's three parts to it: state, county, and local. They more or less parallel each other, so that there's corresponding sections for each employees that fall into each category. The definition of employee is extremely broad. It goes well beyond compensated employees with a full part-time. It also includes any kind of performance of services for a governmental body, election, appointed, part-time, full-time, intermittent, and consultants. The other thing, which is really counterintuitive and people forget about a lot, is it holds not only you, but your immediate family to account. And that means your spouse and children, both you and if you have a spouse, parents, and any siblings. So not in-laws, but siblings. So sometimes people kind of overlook that. They don't even think about the spouse, let alone the extended family that whose conduct is governed by this. So insofar as what you're dealing with in the course of your process here, you are subject to the provisions that, and you really need to be concerned about the provisions where you have some kind of a financial interest in a matter that's before you. And that, again, is defined broadly. And in particular, again, going back to the Ethics Commission, they actually issued a series that was finally consolidated in an advisory in 2005 for affecting abutting or nearby property. So if you were basically within 300 feet of a locus that is the subject of deliberations, and that puts you potentially in conflict. I should also point out that if you have a conflict, you are prohibited from participating. You can't kind of sit there and go along for the ride, and when it gets to a vote, announce that you're conflicted and you're recusing yourself. That's already a violation, if assuming you were conflicted. I'm going to also mention, because of the particular context that we're dealing with, which is the school projects, contemplating a town meeting, contemplating a ballot question, that there is also a separate state agency, a separate body of law dealing with ballot questions. That's the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, and they regulate as the name implies, proceedings related to attempts to influence a ballot question. So that whether it's candidates running for office or it's a Prop 2.5 question, that triggers that law. They tend to overlap somewhat between the ethics law and the campaign and political finance law in the context of town meetings and leading up to ballot questions. So you need to be aware of that as well. Frankly, the consequences are significantly more substantial for a violation, a willful violation of the ethics law. But nevertheless, you need to be aware of both statutes. So that's really a compressed version. I'm happy to answer questions or elaborate as you see fit.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody have any specific questions? I'll just say that one of the reasons why I had asked Mark to come was just because it has been mentioned, at least online, that most people know that my husband's Park and Rec Commissioner. And also that Park and Rec goes into this discussion on occasion. And so I did call on Mark's advice, the Ethics Commission, to ask about that. There's two things that pertain to myself. One is section 19, which really only comes into play if we ever were voting on actually giving Park and Rec commissioners a stipend, similar to like the $900 that the selectmen get. So they said that since we don't do that, that's a non-issue. And if we ever decided to, that I would need to bring something up about that, but that's not on the plate. And so then the other issue is section 23, which is, I think it was like 23B3 or something like that. Basically it says that because I'm married to someone who's also, I guess I'm considered a municipal employee since I was appointed. He was an elected commissioner. That if I felt that there was going to be undue influence on my opinion based on my husband, that I should bow out, but if I did not, that I could just fill out a form that said that based on what we're doing, that if I don't feel that I have any undue influence from my husband, that as long as it was disclosed, that would be
So
fine.
let me jump in, this, I kind of feel like Antiques Roadshow,
Yes.
when they ask you, did you already get an appraisal for this?
Right,
And you jump in
yeah.
up front. So, the ethics law doesn't really primarily focus, and only incidentally, the situation where there are multiple family members all serving as unpaid persons in a municipality, whether elected or appointed. That's not what the focus is. That is not generally a conflict of interest. If you hired your kid as for a position under you, yeah, that absolutely would be. Or if there was some kind of a hierarchy with subordinates, that sort of thing, potentially. But municipal government in Massachusetts would grind to a halt. It's difficult enough to get volunteers if you restricted so that only one person in a family could serve the community.
Yes, so they suggested I just do a disclosure form and give it to Scott, which I did years ago when there was the valid question about the feasibility study, so.
I may also add that there is a provision in the ethics law to designate for the Board of Selectmen to designate, or the Select Board, to designate special municipal employees. And those are basically unpaid volunteers or persons employed for a limited period of hours. And they're not held to the full blown requirements of the ethics law. We have had the selectmen designate virtually every board and committee and eligible person in the town, in town government. We may have let a few more recent ones slide by because you have to do it each time you create a new position, a new commission or what have you. You need to designate that entity as well, position as well. But pretty much everybody is designated as special municipal employees. The other aspect is the Ethics Commission. They have two functions. One is an advisory group, so that if you think you have a conflict or may have a conflict, you can contact them, be very candid with them, and they will advise you accordingly. An appropriate case, I mean, if it's something relatively simple, it may just be a phone conversation with advice. It's more complex, they might ask you to submit something in writing. They would take it under advisement and give you a formal written opinion. As long as you were completely forthcoming with them, you would be entitled to rely upon that as protection. Their other function is enforcement. So if you say the hell with everybody, I'm gonna be who I am and do what I wanna do, and you commit a violation of the ethics law and somebody reports it, then that's an investigatory proceeding, adversarial, and ultimately that's where you can face penalties if it's determined that there's been a significant violation. So I think now I've covered pretty much the major points.
That sounds good. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
No, I mean, I spoke with the office that you speak of as well, just because of the proximity of my residence to the proposed site. And similar fashion to do a disclosure, but I'm outside of the 300-foot abutter rule based on what we looked at on Google, so.
And
but
you're
I have
not in a
that-
butter of a butter either, when they like to get.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is how unrealistic, frankly, this is how this is editorializing, but this is how unrealistic it is. That's only a presumption. If you want to go out and pay an appraiser, you can rebut the presumption that your property is going to be impacted either plus or negative by whatever action is in front of you that you want to participate in. I frankly can't imagine anybody being that committed, but the option is there.
Yes, no, I was recommended to do the disclosure, so personally not, but.
Awesome. Okay. Well, good. Well, thank you, Mark. You can be excused to the
Yeah.
planning board as where you're being
Hasn't even
sent.
started yet.
Have a cup of coffee.
I'll go back to my office and do it from there.
There you go.
Thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, and so, Jeremy has joined us in person, and then, Amanda, can you just say your full name and that you're participating remotely now?
Yes, Amanda Hall, via Zoom.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so, what I really wanted to spend tonight doing was kind of having a recap conversation of where we're at with the things that people have been researching, as well as any comments or questions or thoughts that people have based on all of the hours of Zoom we've been spending either in person or watching. And then I guess we can go about it a couple different ways. I do want us to be sensitive to the fact that Christine only has until 7:50 in her car. So we could either kind of go through the topics, or we could, I also want to get to the outline for the website that we're putting together. So we could either go through the topics on the outline or on the topics people are working on. Does anybody have a preference? Which way we,
Maybe Christine has a preference.
do you have, Christine, what would you like to talk about before you have to leave?
I can give if you want, I can just give a brief update of what Jill and I have been researching. If that makes sense, or I don't really have a preference, but if you want me to before I leave, I'm happy to do that.
Let's definitely do that. Let's do that first.
Okay, so Jill and I were tasked with the topic of the town planning issues and economic vitality to the downtown in terms of the location of the new Wheelock School, and walking and biking distance to the from the sites. And I actually walked the both sites. So I walked from Wheelock to Starbucks one weekend with my husband, and from the Wheelock site to Starbucks, it's about 1.25 miles. And then in their sidewalks all along Elm Street and South Street. So the walking path would be safe because there are sidewalks that students could walk along down Elm Street and then all along South Street to to 109. Similarly with Dale, that distance of walkability is half a mile, and there are also sidewalks. So, so in terms of safety, there are sidewalks all along. It's just a little bit longer from Wheelock to Dale. We also talked with Sarah Posa, and Jill and I also reviewed the master plan too. The master plan, talks generally about supporting the new Dale Street, the new school, the reuse of Dale Street, Park and Rec. I mean, it was very kind of general. It didn't say, oh, we want it at one site over another. It was just more, in my opinion, when I reviewed the master plan, it was more general in terms of preserving open space and supporting the school committee in a new elementary school and a new park and rec building, the reuse of the Dale Street School. Sarah Posa did mention that there was a survey that was done regarding the downtown businesses. That report hasn't been put out yet. She said that it would be about 2 weeks or so. Jill, is that right? Was it about 2 weeks that you said that survey would be kind of released?
Another couple of weeks. Results.
Yeah. And then, once hopefully sometime in later September or October, we'll see the results of that. But, so it was hard to tell, so there wasn't really it's hard to tell what the effect of having, obviously at Dale Street, the walk is shorter, kids go down the half day. And I can't say for certain whether kids wouldn't walk from the new Wheelock site to downtown. You just don't know. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I guess my thought is that kids, like to be together. They'll walk to wherever, they'll just walk. And I don't think that would be a big hindrance. But that's just my personal opinion. So I guess that's just to be seen. So I don't really have, any sort of, I don't know, I can't say whether Wheelock will, I guess, deter kids from walking downtown on half days or any other days. The other thing that we talked about is from a permitting standpoint, permitting, because once it's approved, it still has to go through the formal permitting process with the planning board. And because it is an educational institution, it gets the benefit of the Dover Amendment, which is really like the use is exempt, so that it doesn't have to fall prey to the zoning requirements. That use is exempt. So in the bylaws, it has that it's subject to site plan review by the planning board at either the Dale Street or Wheelock. So it would go through the same permitting criteria in terms of site plan review. I guess the one thing is that because there are wells, the wells at the Wheelock site, you would just have that buffer of like the kind of the no build zone that you wouldn't be able to within, I think it's 400 feet. But other than that, that's really the information that I have. Jill, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that, or if anyone has questions, but that's kind of the information that I found.
Yeah, no, you covered it well. There wasn't much else. I think, like you said, the plan, has general support for what the community wants to achieve in the town. So one spot over the other, this project is supported, I think, through the master planning that there needs to be a school. But other than that, there wasn't really anything that was going to be contradicting this project and the master plan itself. Nothing that I think that we would call attention to, other than the points that Christine brought up.
Can you talk a little bit more about that survey that is going to be released in a couple of weeks? What's that all about?
Yeah, so I'm sure Sarah can explain it better, but so there was a survey that went out first to the businesses in the downtown area. And I don't recall exactly the nature of the questions in there, but it was maybe what would help. It was tied to the revitalization of businesses after COVID and the pandemic. So maybe what kind of support they need or what they would like to see in the area, maybe to do support business and sales. The second piece to that was a citizen that went out, survey that went out to the citizens in the town. What they would want to see in the downtown area, what would bring more people to that area. So questions probably around parking, seating, outdoor dining space, things like that. So the results of the citizen survey is still being compiled by the company that was, or the consultant that was hired. And then those results should be on in a couple of weeks. So
it really doesn't sound like it has anything to do with the Wheelock School or the Dale School.
No, it's just
No,
in general.
okay,
It's
just
to
in general.
revitalize,
Okay,
yeah,
fine.
help the
Yeah,
businesses downtown.
And then Sarah did mention that 100 businesses in town were surveyed and there were 26 responses. So about a quarter of the businesses actually responded to the survey. So in terms of data points, that's what they were working with.
Gotcha. And then I'll just add, and I've been collecting information, but I haven't had a chance to really look at it yet. But I know that we have kind of to look at some more sidewalk maps from Mo. There was the one that was in the SBC did, but then there's one that Mo was drafting that actually goes into the condition of sidewalks. And then also the school provided a list of what all the safety streets are. So you can kind of get an idea of what streets around the different schools in town they deem as always have to have busing regardless, just because of the safety on those streets. And so kind of looking at all of those pieces together, I think goes towards this whole kind of walkability, walking, biking, busing situation. And then as part of that, I also have had some initial discussions about how exactly the busing would work, because there has definitely been some talk about whether or not the cost for busing will go up and how that is necessarily going to change. But the way that what I have learned is that the way that our contract for busing works in town is that we are allotted 4 hours with our buses. So you may do as many bus routes as you want that you can do within those 4 hours. The way that it currently works is that there are 2 bus runs in town. There is a bus run that happens for all K-5 together at once. And so as it goes around town, it's picking up every student K-5, and then it's making 2 drop-off stops, one at Wheelock, or I guess technically 3, one at Wheelock, one at Dale, one at Memorial. And does the same thing in the afternoon. And so with this proposal, the number of buses does not change. We actually, I guess in theory, lose 1 drop-off, because I believe that they had said that at Wheelock it would be a joint drop-off spot and then the Memorial spot. So there are no more buses dropping off at the Wheelock campus than there had been now, because I know there had been some concerns about that. So that seems to be from at least an amount of buses driving down to Wheelock is no more buses than there are today. Well, Christine, while you're here, I guess, does anybody have any other comments on those topics before we go to the next one?
The master, one of the submissions to the MSBA had reference to the highlights for the key elements of the vision from the townwide master plan. Do you know if Sarah was participating in that, or if she saw this list, and if so, were there any comments on any site that would be contradicting to this?
When we talked to her, she specifically said that she wanted to stay out of the process, like on purpose, only because 1, she doesn't really have a preference, and 2, it has to go through the permitting like process anyways down the road, but she doesn't really have like an opinion one way or another in terms of I prefer one site over another. It's it goes through the same permitting process regarding site plan review. So all the same issues at each site would come up with respect to traffic, stormwater traffic mitigation, stormwater management, and so they would just analyze it all the same way.
And how about feedback from anybody in the community that's been engaged in this, or has anybody, said, wait a minute, this is contradictory to our vision, or was there any conversation that?
I don't recall her having any feedback or
Yeah.
approaching her about it. I mean, when you read the plan itself, it's in there, she's supporting the school, so.
So I mean, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, Christine, about the master plan. The wording of the master plan is sort of general, I think, is what you're saying, and therefore one could interpret it such that either site would be, that the master plan would support the values in either site. Is that fair to say?
That was
Yes.
nice.
Yes.
I think you achieve the objectives of the plan regardless of where
Yeah.
the school's done.
Got it,
Yeah,
got it.
supporting education and.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Christine, are there any other topics you would like to hear about versus talking about in your last 20 minutes before you have to go into your meeting?
No, I mean, I've been listening to, thank you to everyone on like the Warrant Committee, everyone that's participated in all of this. And, I've listened to all the subcommittee meetings, and there's a lot of good dialogue going on, a lot of issues and a lot of dialogue. So, I'm happy that we're going through this process to get clarity for the town and, for everyone because I feel that this is it gets very heated, and everyone has their strong opinions. And I think that the process that we're going down in terms of just getting the facts and, however you want to vote, you can vote, but at least like vote on the facts. And I feel like the process that we're undertaking is really good. It's helpful for the town. And so, thank you to all of you guys for doing that.
Well, yeah, and just the last point, the reason I was asking the question is that in some of the dialogue that we had last week, it was saying that this is the site that's being proposed is in conflict with the vision of the master plan. and I guess we're gonna hit this on a number of different points, right? How do, some is its opinion, right? And some is judgment and some is fact. And, I want to be able to at least, as a committee, make sure that we're not addressing items that are addressed, right? That are brought to us here, that's the point. And so, and in some of these cases, I guess I'm asking the open question to the committee. That we all heard the comments last week that this is, we heard comments that this is changing the nature of the town, that the things of that nature. I know that's a judgment. And if we say that's a judgment, we can't opine on it, fine. But if there's something that says, like the opinion of, preserving small town feeling, well, obviously we're gonna have a school, so it shouldn't have an impact on that, but open space and natural features, I mean, this is open space, so it's gonna be affected, but look, I'm gonna make it, it does say support the excellence in education at the schools, and building a new school does that, right? So I don't know if I'm making that point, but I mean, it was raised as being, this is really against what the vision that's being proposed, and my question is, can we, probably an opinion question. Yeah, I'm not calling on you, it's not my job, I don't do that, but I'm just wondering.
We're a small town with lots of open space. We'll be okay. Not a sufficient answer, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm not, I wasn't, because this is just a dialogue,
Well, kind of leads me to that procedural question that I have. We get questions now that come through the emails and we've seen them. And maybe you're gonna be covering this later, but are we supposed to respond directly to that person? So, John Smith's asked a question and it's a specific question. Do we get the
I actually
facts
have-
behind that?
I have been responding to some of them, and the others, I am telling them that I'll get them the answer and.
Well,
But
I guess that's my question.
Yeah.
Do we respond directly or do we direct them to the, your repository of information? That
Yes. Yes,
Possibly both.
so what I have been doing, anybody that has been sending an email to all of us, I forward it to all of you. I respond back to them, thanking them for answering the
Right.
question and letting them know that we will respond to the answer in a public manner, and I will email them and let them know.
Oh, in a public. manner.
And so,
it's not-
and also give them the answer. So my hope is that we are, being able to take some of these questions and put them in the document center that we're building. So like, if there was, so there is a specific question that we talked about at I think it was the conversation that we did with the SBC about the oil spill from 1988 down at Wheelock. So that came
Right.
from a question. So the document about that and the cleanup has been provided to us. I have sent a PDF of that letter to the person that asked the question. That document is also going to be in the document center. And so the idea is that if there was a question that came up, which is going to be about something we'll talk about in the session upcoming, a question came in that was all about, well, what would be the plan for the reuse of Dale and what is going to be that process? So we're going to be holding another meeting on the 23rd of September about that topic. So my response to that question is going to be, please participate in the session on the 23rd, and I hope all of your questions get answered at that. So that's kind of how I'm going about it.
But I do think it's worth spending a little time on this, because we have some documents that are just, factual, like, they are what they are, like the letter about the oil spill. There shouldn't be any disagreement over something like that. But if somebody sends us documents and maybe they're from one of the packs, and we look at it and maybe there's, questionable information there, or it's very old, like 30 years old,
Mhm.
like an article that's 30 years old or something. I mean, at what point do we as a committee say jointly, we think this is worthy of putting on our website, or maybe we send something back and say, can we clarify this point, or, you know, have a discussion about it before we just, so we don't just take stuff. and
I think
put it on.
anything that we post up in the document center has to be agreed upon by all of us.
Okay.
Which is what I would like to go through before we go through tonight. So I have, Steve and I went back and forth on trying to gather all the documents and making the links. So I do want to walk through that tonight to make sure that we all agree that those are good documents to put up. And then whatever we agree on are the good factual documents to put up. Nick is gonna work on starting to get that together. But then it can be a building thing. So if in a couple of weeks, we decide that there's another document that needs to come up, the next time we'll meet, we will meet first and talk about it before a document goes up.
Okay.
If that
That makes sense.
makes
Yeah.
sense for everybody.
Yeah, that's,
Just so
I
we
think that's fine.
most consensus.
But I mean, I think that, you know, in the land of everybody shouldn't always be unanimous, because it is good to have disagreement and discussion. I do feel that we should be pretty darn close to unanimous on whether or not something is a fact.
Right.
So I really would like us all to have agreement on those before they go up and basically have our names behind them. That's
So
fine.
that means, or sort of implies that there's not a lot of synthesizing of information or regurgitating sort of a judgment on or response to a question. We're looking for other people's work to respond to that, or are we, and therefore maybe the committee coming to a conclusion about providing an answer?
I mean, I think that if the question that is asked is asking our opinion, only thing we can do is provide them with the factual documents to help them form an opinion, you know, at this point, because if what we're working towards is, we now, you know, we tentatively have scheduled on the 26th of October to do a warrant hearing on this, but I really feel like the warrant hearing is for people to give us their opinions, because we're not gonna have voted yet. We can point out to people where they can get the documents, but then I think it's more of a forum for people to come and share their opinions, because we won't have talked yet about ours and how we're gonna vote. So it's a little bit more of a, I don't know if you call it more of a public forum than a hearing, but I want the general public to have an opportunity to give us their opinion on the facts, and then we'll get together at a meeting following that to discuss our own opinions finally at that point and vote. Because I think what's hard is that there's so many topics that fit into different fact buckets, right? So we've got the stuff on water and sewer, and there's the stuff on the busing, and then there's stuff on site selection, all those different things. Every single person in town is gonna have a different top thing that matters to them.
Right.
And so if somebody's top thing is traffic versus cost, they have every right to have that be their number one thing. And so we just need to kind of look into that and provide whatever documents we can find about it so that they can make their own informed decision. If they choose it, that's their overriding factor, that's their right. And then there's lots of people that have come to us that have said cost is their number one thing. And I think as a Warrant Committee, obviously, we're gonna dive into that pretty deep, but on these other issues, like the ones that Christine and Jill, you know, talked about at the beginning, it's almost like the best we can do is provide them the same documents that we read in an organized manner that it's easy to find. That's
Yeah.
kind of the entire point of the Warrant website, is that the vast majority of the things, when we go down the list, are already posted. They're just
Right.
posted in lots and lots of random places.
Right.
And
Yeah,
so,
it is amazing, the list, when you look at it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very exhausting and
It's a
extensive,
lot
the
of-
one we pulled together, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge.
there's thousands of pages of information up there, so.
yeah,
It's all, you're right, she said it's everywhere, it's like a big. document.
right, we're really just trying
The
to,
benefit we're doing is bringing it all together in one place.
right,
We want to make sure we answer everybody's question.
yes.
So is there, or have you been keeping, like, there's been 25 questions already. do you have a repository? Here's all these questions?
Well, so right now they just live in the one Gmail box for the warrant committee. My plan, which I didn't get to yesterday, was I actually wanted to print out all of them and kind of like write them all out so we can kind of like checkbox, have we covered all of these
And
questions?
so we can go through, make sure we have got a response or.
100%.
Point the
I think
people
that we,
to it,
I think that
right.
we need to do that. I'm not prepared to do that tonight,
I
but I think that,
understand. No.
I think 100%
Yeah.
you're correct. I think
Right.
we need to do that. I think,
I mean, some of the questions are easy to
Right.
answer right
Just-
away.
Right.
Others, you know, require a lot of analysis and study or like around the cost information.
Sure.
So everybody's got a different angle they want to look at costs from.
right.
And, you know, I think one of our jobs is to sort of sort through all that and maybe try to bring some clarity to it so that it's less confusing, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think at one of our future meetings, we're just gonna bring the
Yeah, to do
questions
that,
and make
yeah.
sure that we've covered them all. And if we haven't,
Right.
go back and figure that out.
And I think in that area, for example, the question on the environmental question, right?
Mhm.
You get a letter from an environmental consultant.
Mhm.
I don't think we opine on the
No,
merits of an environmental consultant. I think we say, this is a letter, you can read it. You can bring your own judgment to it,
right,
right?
right,
Okay.
exactly right, yeah. And to that end, there was one question, I think, about the environmental consultant, and then when I was putting the list together, I was trying to find the letter, not even realizing that it was an appendix on something else that Steve had already given me. I'm like, I know I saw this, where did I see it? And he was like, it was on page 4 of this one, and I was like, oh, right, okay, I guess I don't have to do that one separately because it was there. But yeah, so, do we want to go through the list, or do we want to go, since we've been talking about that now, like, do we want to do that, or we want to go through any of these topics? I mean, I suppose we'll hit the topics at the same time as we do the list. Anybody?
Might be a way to organize our
Our
discussion.
discussion, all right, so if we look at the list, so the first thing on the list, is just process. Kind of got a header, it says process where we are now and how we got here. And so it's the MSBA and SBC process, and so the proposed links are, one takes you directly to the Medfield Elementary School project website. One takes you to the document center that houses the minutes of the SBC. And then to that end, for openness to all, we did receive a question that asked about the minutes from 2018, because there was an open meeting law complaint about the fact that those are missing. We were provided by Christine and her team the documentation around that. Basically, there is a hole in the minutes from 2018. It unfortunately has to do with Mike Sullivan's passing, and that they were all in his steno books, and the steno books are not able to be retrieved or found after his passing. So the response to that is in there. And then the last link is about the MSBA process. So those are two.
Can I just ask
Sure.
a question on the,
Oh, this is the Word document?
That you just sent
Yeah.
today?
Mhm.
Okay.
I guess the question, Christine, is, I saw the back and forth, and I know you communicated with the state agency. Is this open to further contention?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, has not been fully resolved yet.
okay.
Yeah.
And does that have an impact on what we're doing with the school committee, school building committee?
I don't know if I can speak to whether or not it has an impact. I can't produce the minutes from 2018, which is basically the bottom line of that. I have, reached out, I've verbally talked to everybody, asking them to pull their agendas together, their calendars, what they remember from those meetings, but obviously we're talking 3 years ago. Other than their attendance at those meetings, I don't know what I can pull together, not having been at those meetings.
When was the SBC organized as a committee? Is that in 19 or was it in 18?
I think it was in 19. I have to go back and look, honestly.
Okay,
18 was most likely the planning and permanent planning and building committee prior to the school building committee. Yeah,
okay.
but this request is for the permanent planning.
It's
and
for the
building committees.
permanent planning, right?
Yes,
So there's a period of time for that committee in 2018 that you're having difficulty recreating. Got it.
right, when they were having initial discussions about the project.
Okay.
Is it a period of time or is it one meeting or a
It's-
handful of meetings?
It's a handful of meetings. It's predominantly every meeting from when the public safety building ended at the beginning of 2018, when Daedalus was the OPM and they were taking the minutes, to when I believe it was transitioned to Mike Sullivan, and until the school building committee was formed. So,
But the school building committee minutes are complete.
Those are
Correct,
complete.
yes.
That's my understanding.
yes,
That the
those are
school
on the
building
website.
committee minutes are complete.
It's the permanent
There's
building
no-
preceding the school building.
Okay.
So yeah, so those are the only 4 documents that we kind of have on the table to go up in the, or some of, I guess a couple of them are links because we're clearly not going to put every single meeting minute from the SBC in there. We're just going to link to where they already are kept. I guess, does anybody have any questions or comments or anything about those 4 documents? Or links to websites, I should say, because the MSBA process actually brings you to a larger MSBA website. So then the next section was, there was a lot of discussion in our meeting with the school committee last week on Wednesday night, where they talked about the educational program and all of the work that went into that, that then fed into the design of the buildings. That actually lives inside of the preferred schematic report from December of 2020. So the reference that I've made here is to somehow let people know that if they would like to see that educational plan, it starts on page 277 of that document at Appendix B. And so there is no separate document to post for that, just that it lives inside of there. So for design alternatives, we have the preferred schematic report that was finished in December of 2020. And then that was obviously presented by the SBC and was sent over to the MSBA. There was a conversation last week when we met with the Dale at Dale group, where near the end of the meeting, Steve had the opportunity to ask Jerry and the other members that were there, which they prefer. And so there was a discussion there that they felt that the design they would prefer has not been presented yet.
Yeah, which I could, that was something that I learned a little bit in each of the meetings.
Yeah.
In that meeting, that was one big thing I learned.
I learned, that was a big thing I learned too.
They want to demolish the existing Dale building. And, that they're, what they want from a design option perspective wasn't in any of the submissions.
To that point, Steve, did Jerry make the point, someone on the Dale make the point that the survey amongst the SBC was flawed? That
Yes,
led to their voting
yes. Yeah.
because it didn't have that as an option, or didn't tease that out in any of the questioning?
Yeah, I think that's his viewpoint, yes. I think that's, I don't want to speak for him, but
Yeah.
that's kind of what I think I heard, is that,
Yeah, he was quite adamant that that was a flawed
yeah,
instrument.
I don't know what exact words he used, it wasn't that what was done for the Dale site, there were like 3 options, is the add reno and the 2 construction options that none of those were all flawed, I guess, in his, because of some assumptions they made in those design options.
I don't know that they've followed up with the assumptions, if that were incorrect. Did we ever get
I
those?
think we ran out of time,
Oh, okay, we asked them to send them.
Yeah,
and I don't think we.
there's a series of things we asked them for,
Mhm.
and I just saw, there was an email that came and said they're gonna try to get them all to us by Thursday
Oh,
this
okay.
week, so.
I think it was that, and then reviewing if we wanted additional due diligence, the individual selection sheets from the folks on the committee. just
Yes,
To follow-ups around what was going on with assumptions, but.
Right, yeah, so we don't have that yet, so.
No.
And
um,
then the detail around the $11 million number.
Yes.
They have, there's like an $11 million number that they use for infrastructure, I think, a difference in infrastructure. And that's different than one I saw in a letter, like in February, where it was 5 million, so he's gonna give us all that detail.
It's gonna give us all this, so that way we can look at it.
Yeah.
some more.
One thing can I add, do you think it would be important to add to our repository? I think there was a statement by the teachers as to I don't know if it was to what went to the schematic design of the school, but their opinion as to what they felt was in terms of like a good design of the school. Do you think that that would be something that we should include in our repository of documents?
When you say design, do you mean like the educational program? What should, like
Yeah.
all the different elements of the educational program and in terms of, what's needed?
Yeah, like the maker space and things like that, that they felt would be an educational benefit to the students.
Yes, we have that in our outline.
Well,
There's a
I'm
separate-
wondering if, like, Christina, are you talking about, I feel like I saw somewhere and I don't have my hands on it, like, it was like an open letter that they wrote.
Oh,
in
the
addition-
letter.
Like, I think that's what she's referring to, is the open letter from the teachers.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there was an open letter from the teachers, and I'm not sure if it's the same letter that was read at town meeting, where I think it was Sarah Isaacson that read the letter from the teachers. I'm not sure if they're one in the same document.
You have that? Does anybody have it?
I'm sure we can get it, I know.
I'll track it down. I can track it down.
Well, I'm asked a question because this is an area that, it does come through in the educational philosophy, right? It is what's that's what the school committee and the superintendent spoke to the other evening, saying, these are the benefits. The meeting we had last Thursday morning, I think the statement basically was, you're gonna get a good school. And the teachers will be happy because it's a new school. And they'll, so,
Bob, do you mean at either location?
yes, I mean, they said in either location, but, they obviously favored Dale, but what they said was, and they quoted Jeff Marsden from the night before, saying, yes, we will deliver a school in either location that fits our mission. What he then said was, we will deliver a better solution at this site. So my point, I think, is I think that the teacher's letter, while is public and is to me, is very valuable, it reinforces the statement, but I don't think it adds new facts. Other than the fact that a teacher supports it, and then that's my concern.
Yeah.
Getting into the back and forth, he said, she said thing. Because then they say,
we
well,
can get a letter from everybody.
yeah, and an anonymous letter from the teachers who are afraid to say that they want it, I really don't want to get, I personally,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
That's
so,
fair.
but the superintendent's letter, the superintendent's position is put out there. It
In
fits the
the
mission.
educational program.
Yeah. And I think and you make a decision saying, because we get a lot of letters from people saying, do we really need that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, well, I
They can
think
put that on
Sarah's
Facebook.
letter was terrific. I think it showed a lot of courage and character, but for the purpose of what we're trying to put together, Christine, maybe you differ, so I'd be welcome. I'd like to hear.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I just think it from a teacher standpoint, but at the same time, I think they did say like, any new school would be better than what there is now. So, I get your point, Bob.
But I do think in that context, that there are people in town who said, yeah, my kid went to this school and it's fine. And we've seen letters that said, hey, what's wrong with modular classrooms? And I think educationally, that can be addressed from a factual point of view. If there's any contention that, saying, wait a minute, you're overstating the issue with Dale Street. It's a great school. They're delivering great students. It's sort of like, when did you stop beating your wife question, you can't, what are you gonna say? Of course, yeah, we have good students and they're plowing through it, but do we really have to subject them to that? And I guess that's the factual opinion piece of it.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
I mean, I know this is, I don't know if you have it as a separate, we're into design alternatives now, or is it site selection?
Well, I think
Maybe.
we just finished design alternatives. It's basically, it's just a preferred schematic report kind of twice, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
and the public forum presentation that they did in June after the town meeting. Those are really the only documents.
Yeah,
So just the one thing on the MSBA process, that is a subcommittee. Ed and I are.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Okay,
do you guys
yeah,
want to
so
talk
the
about
question,
that?
my question is, how does that supplement this? I mean, should we be focusing on this and just making sure it's clarified for this purpose?
well, I think the objective of this outline is to make sure that, oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that there's one line item in the MSBA.
Oh, and I think that
links to the MSBA website, okay? If you have documents that you think
right.
are relevant to that topic,
Right.
that
Then we
aren't
should
off
add
of the
those.
MSBA website, but maybe you have something else, then
Or if you
we-
want to highlight a
we-
specific one off the MSBA website, like this link is just taking you
then
to the
just let us
MSBA
know
website.
that,
Right.
Yeah,
We could-
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe just to throw out my thought on that.
That's
is
what it links to, is the
That's
module.
If we're talking to the Mike Quinlan about the MSBA process, some of the things on timing, have been called into question. Why didn't we have
That link takes
a
you
vote
here.
on the site? Things of that.
Well, that's probably under site selection, though, right?
Well,
vote on the site.
it might be on process saying, well, if we have to submit to the MSBA, I mean,
Right.
what do you vote on and what don't? I think that's a critical question for my mind,
What is the MS, what are all the checkpoints?
Yeah, and when do you have a vote? I
Yeah.
mean, the timing of the, to have a site selection vote, to me, how deep we are into this right now, and we're still gathering facts to support the recommendation of the committee, would say, this is the time to vote on the site, as opposed to why, because it was raised, on Thursday morning. Why didn't we have a vote on the site?
They were looking for
I think,
the vote prior to any submission.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. And
Let's
that's
have
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
yeah.
And does the MSBA process lend itself to that?
And.
right, I mean, in
You know what I'm saying?
fairness to them, I think they would say, we wanted the town to vote on what
No, I
site.
understand that, I'm not,
The
I'm not
MSBA
trying to be
process
unfair,
doesn't
I'm not
require
trying to be
that.
unfair to
Yeah,
anyone,
yeah.
I'm trying to be fair by answering their question.
Right,
Yeah,
but I
And the
think,
question is, is it possible and practical to say we should have had a vote on the site?
the way I would look at that is, and we've heard this a couple of different times, is the educational plan dictates the site. The site that can best achieve the educational plan is the site that we should propose. And it's not, let's vote for this place or put it at Hospital Hill or Dale Street, anything. That's not the way you go about it. You go about it by establishing the educational plan first, and then that dictates the site. So to say we as a town should decide, oh, we're gonna put it at Dale Street or Wheelock or any other place first, it's it circumvents the whole MSBA process. When you go through that process, it says that very clearly, that's how you do it.
So again, so that's great, because that's exactly what I'm asking in terms of supplementing this, not with a judgment, but with a.
Right.
It's right in
And so
the,
this page that Ed is
Yeah.
reading off of is what the MSBA process link
Right,
goes to,
right.
is that?
right.
Yeah, is this page,
So we're
it's,
covered then.
yeah, it's called their
So
modules
So
overview, it's
somebody
like a
could,
one sheet.
you know, maybe you wanna, I mean, this might be something you guys might wanna do, if you think there are key things, because the MSBA site is huge.
Yeah.
So if that thing is what you want, maybe there's a link for a topic to go to that particular page. Maybe there's other things in their process that you want to sort of highlight. Then we can sort of blow that up rather than just have one link, we could have multiple links, you know.
Right.
Kind of like
So
the
people
page
don't-
references, right?
Yeah, so
Exactly.
So people don't have to go
Start an hour,
searching
15
for it.
minutes
you
in.
know.
Yeah, I know, all right, I mean, believe me. I'm asking these questions for clarification, I don't have an opinion, but I think
Right.
that issue was very, very vehemently presented last week. The whole issue of trust, circumvention, not listening. You know, I'm not hiding behind the MSBA, but if the MSBA process.
You know,
That's gonna be.
my understanding is there's thousands of documents to support what the MSBA requires. And they were followed and, you know, they were certified by selectmen, school committee people, and, you know, there's multiple submissions, there's all sorts of detail. So they follow the MSBA process. I don't think there's
Right.
any doubt in my mind about that.
Yeah, no, I didn't know.
So they're arguing that there should have been something else done besides what the MSBA requires.
And will
What
we
if,
address
just to
that?
play devil's advocate, what if they went down, even with this educational plan in place? What if the other site was selected? Would MSBA approve that site? Would they have approved the
Well,
Dale Street
they
site?
ask-
Will they approve the Dale Street
They
site?
ask
Yes,
questions,
ask.
every time there's a submission, there's all sorts of questions that come back from the MSBA and they have to respond. We have to respond to them. So I don't want to guess.
My point is, would the MSBA look back and say, oh, your educational plan says you should go to this site, but you prefer that site? How would they take that? How
I
would the
think
MSBA
it's clear that the educational plan would fit either site.
Yeah.
I don't think we should.
That's kind of my
But one's
point,
better than the other.
so that it kind of
Right.
unrolls the, sure, they may say that you want to have a site that best fits your educational plan, certainly. But in the bigger context and other factors considered, the MSBA would approve other sites.
Good.
I think
Yeah.
it's probably, I think it's
Yeah.
likely, I think it's likely that they would have.
Yeah.
So there's a whole
So I think-
repository though, of all that back and forth correspondence, right? That would be public.
I do think when I was looking for links, I do believe that there was actually whatever they had submitted that had the educational plan, I think on the elementary school website, they then have the responses, the questions that they were given, the responses they had to give.
Okay, so it would be.
And then in the
It's actually
final,
in the submission, so it's like a lag, so like.
Was that?
But just
PSR?
maybe an easier call out if people want to see what was going back and forth.
yeah, we
yeah.
definitely
It's
could
all
do
in the-
that.
it's all
We
in there.
definitely could,
It's
we
all-
definitely could call it out, cause like this link that goes to the Medfield website for it, like they
Yeah.
have it in bunches, like when you go to that page, it has the preferred schematic and then it has all of those different things, but one of the bunches in the middle, like it shows what the MSBA gave back that they had to reply to.
Yes, okay.
And then cause actually the ed plan one that I linked to here in December has what it was, redlined what it changed to after MSBA feedback, because there was one that was submitted in March. And then they gave them feedback and then they changed it into the final, so this one that's in this appendix B has both the original and the red line and the new.
Yeah, you
Okay,
can
so
see
you can
what
see
they
that.
comment on.
You can totally
the
see it.
responses. It's all there.
Yeah, I don't think that any that there's a belief that if the MSBA was given a Dale location at Elm, at Adams and Dale Street, that they wouldn't have accepted it.
Yeah.
I think that the pieces where where the differential is that the committee and the school committee and ultimately the selectmen agreed that for the following reasons, this was the preferable, but it was the town's decision, quote, right? The town
Yeah.
leadership's position.
And then, yeah, and
Not, the only thing that I think that really comes up in the MSBA process that leads to contention is their insistence on a 575 enrollment. Okay, and that's a kind of the red line, right? When we have to accept that 575
Right.
and work accordingly. Other than that, I think everything else is sort of the same, you know, I mean, the MSBA isn't gonna say, no, you're too close to your well field. Or they're not gonna say, you know, they don't get involved in the parking or replacing the school. They tell you what they won't pay for, right? Which is, I guess that's a second, right?
Right.
The piece that the MSBA does not reimburse and the enrollment of the two differential between the two sites.
yeah. So, I mean, there is, I sort of, this is in the MSBA submission, and it's also in the community forum document. There's this pros and cons document that.
Right.
And I mean, I hold this by me all the time, because there's like, I thought they did a good job documenting each site's pros and cons. And the amazing thing is, this, in my mind, a lot of this hasn't changed. We still, you could look at this and see, everything we're hearing and talking about is still on this list. So it's sort of, I call it my North Star. It sort of keeps me balanced and looking at it, because it's got everything in it, I think.
And I think it's important, because that was referenced, and then the question came up on Thursday morning, have you seen the individual
Yeah.
things? And I think that for the purposes of clarity, because I had the privilege to attend all these meetings, that when this came up, there was a pretty good, I would say, not pretty good, there was a somewhat robust conversation about, oh, wait a minute, not wait a minute, but okay, I see where the aggregation of all these surveys are, but individuals said, I wasn't looking at it like add up the numbers and this is where it was. It really was an accumulation of the key points, right? Which, as you see in there, and judgments on each, by each individual, so you go around the room and the 9 members, I think the 9 members are voting. Excuse me. They articulated it pretty well, saying, it wasn't, it's a number and a judgment, and you do the best you can. A lot of it's putting the thumb up, but in the end,
I think
your North Star reflects.
this got put together after those individuals.
Well, it's an aggregation of it.
And I think it was like Gus Murray who suggested that they do this.
No, and I'm not invalidating it, I'm just saying it wasn't just a check the box,
Right.
as I said, it was back and forth, and there was a lot of conversation, but the committee, as I recall from my memory, but we should look at it, you can look at it, agreed that this was a reflection
Of what everyone had.
of what they're doing. So I think it's valid, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
Is that document one of the documents in our repository?
Yes, it's page 23 of the community forum.
June 23.
The June 13th,
June
June
right.
13th community forum, it's page 23.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
I titled it Public Forum Presentation on June 13th, 2021. That's the link that you got.
Yeah.
And what you will see that on this list, it does actually link us back to the same documents over and over again to a degree. But the part of the reason why we landed on that, on the way to do this is a little bit about how the website works in Medfield. I sat with Nick for a little bit so I didn't wanna, we're not hiring some web consultant, we're gonna use the Warrant Committee webpage. And originally Steve had like laid this out as like a table, but the reality is that the website works better as an outline. So it forces us to toss some of these things in here because I did think that it was good from the idea of if traffic is your number one thing, you can go to traffic and maybe it's the same thing.
People are gonna skip to what.
Yeah.
Skip to the heading
top
that they
priorities.
cared the
Yeah.
most about, so I didn't wanna put something only in one bucket.
No, that's- I think that makes
No,
sense.
it isn't a lot.
Do you mind,
of work.
can I
Yeah.
ask a question on that matrix
No.
again? What, this was put together in consideration of the options that were presented for the Dale Street site, correct? Not,
When you say this, what are you talking?
I think he's talking about your North Star.
Yes.
This-
yeah, you're no star, yeah.
So this,
This table
so what,
was,
so
the
they,
pros and cons are based on what was presented.
it
It may not include an option that the Dale
it does not include.
That is
that.
correct.
So they did like started with 16 options and sort of cut it down to sort of, once they eliminated the 3, 4, 5 grade configuration, they cut it down to, I think, 8. And so, but those are design options for buildings, right, and sites. And there's
And they all were either Dale or Wheelock.
they were all at either Dale or Wheelock. This is sort of a simplification of those.
Okay,
So there's 2 issues. One is sort of, how do you want the building to look, how big it is, and where, and what configuration is it? Is it like a pod configuration? Is it like 2, how does it sit on the site? And then, but this, what they did is they had meetings in last fall, a year ago, where they went through, the SBC went through their deliberations, they fill out these sheets, they met with the selectmen. The selectmen said, we hear you, but we're not ready to kind of vote on this now. We want more input, more from the community. We want you to sort of have some additional meetings. Somewhere between that time, this got put together and it made it into the.
yeah, I think it's a great
Yeah.
summary. My point is, I guess there's probably, maybe it's several of these cons for one of the sites, the Dale Street site, that may not apply based on
Right.
other alternatives.
That's
For
that's a
instance,
good point, yeah.
So one of the cons listed here for Dale Street is reuse of the existing building will result in inefficiency. If that's not a reuse of the existing.
Right,
building,
because
that would
I think that.
So they didn't study the complete demo of Dale.
Because all of
They
the
didn't do that.
options there was like the straight rental and then they were all like ad rentals, like everything kept the historic front of the building.
That
And
was based on community.
Right, and
Sure.
so they did not pursue an option that did not keep part of the historic structure. And what was suggested on Thursday was that because we were never presented with an option that completely removed the entire historic structure, we did not actually see all of the potential options of that area. That was what I walked away
So
with.
we don't.
It's
we
not
don't-
like a good.
Yeah, and
apples to
we,
apples
I mean,
in my opinion.
Yeah.
it's hard to deal with that, right? Because we don't have a detailed cost study of that option. We don't have how the phasing was, there's all sorts of
Right.
issues behind each of these options, how you do phasing, how you do all. So maybe we'll see what we get on Thursday, but maybe they have some of that to share with us. I don't know,
Yeah.
but
It could-
it's hard to deal with it because we don't
Oh,
have.
sure, we don't have the
details.
same
But
level of
and
information for that
the,
option.
and the June 13th meeting was a public forum,
Right,
right? And it was engaging the questions that were raised in the citizens petition.
right.
So it wasn't, and it was to say, so that this was the part of their attempt, the attempt by the school building committee to address the questions of the public.
Yeah.
So that's why.
It's a great
that's what-
summary table.
That's what the
Yeah.
specific, that's why it's specifically there. They, it's not what they didn't do, it's what they did do.
No, what
that
they
led
did
to
with
the
the information
decision.
at the time.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and this was done as when they were making the decision, right? So the only thing that has since sort of come up as an issue, the one thing that I could think of that isn't on here is the the water, issues
Okay.
over at Wheelock.
Mhm.
And I'm assuming that's because the committee felt, the SBC felt that that was not an issue. But it's been raised as an issue, I guess, since then, so, yeah.
Right.
Thank you for
So,
that.
Sorry, thank you.
oh, please, and so for, that kind of like leads us to site selection, so most of the documents that we have listed here for site selection, all of these we've already listed, with the exception, I think, of 2. So we had the program design report that was from March of 2020, the public forum presentation from June of 2021, and then there's also minutes from that. And then this also links again to all of the SBC, actually, it's the SBC meeting minutes specifically from June 23rd. And it also has the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from September 22nd, 2020. And then it also has a link to the preferred schematic report. Those specific meeting minutes were ones that Steve in particular had.
Well, I found them very rich in views and opinions and deliberations on the whole site selection issue. They were, so if you really want to get down into the thinking of the various committees, to hear the views of experts on the SBC, what they thought, and then what the views of the selectmen were. It's all sort of documented. You don't have to listen to 2 hours or 2.5 hours of video. You can read the minutes and it's pretty quick to get through, so.
Thanks for digging those up.
And every once in a while you look over Steve's shoulder, you're like, which one is that? What did you find? Found some treasure troves. And so then the next group is just the final design of the preferred option. These are actually the documents from last week that they approved. So on September 8th, there is 4 documents that are already posted on the website that were submitted. There's the schematic design project manual, the schematic design report, the drawings, final draft, and the DESI special education submittal. Those were all what they submitted. I have listed in yellow a document that I think that would be nice for us to be able to get from someone, which would be a document that talks more about the items that they chose to be, like, for instance, the basketball court is larger than will be fully reimbursed. And so, like, we've talked about that in the different meetings, but I haven't seen a particular one specific document that talks about those, other than maybe digging.
There's something, it's like, it's a very big spreadsheet, so it's hard to read.
Yeah.
Maybe Mike.
What's your
Mike
question on
Quinlan,
it?
Mike Quinlan, he might have something, but just before I forget,
Yeah.
one little editorial comment.
Yeah.
That says document with details of excluded
Oh,
costs.
and it should
What
be,
if you just put included / excluded?
yeah,
Because it's
that's
kind of,
it.
it's got both buckets in it on it, so.
Yeah,
I think Mike can probably give us all other places with the incremental square footage and the incremental cost. That's what you
Yeah.
get, a separate
that's what
schedule,
that's
just
what
a
I-
separate schedule.
Yeah, we asked them.
and
It might
we
be
have talked
easier to
about it in
read,
like different
yeah,
forms,
just
but it would be
to-
nice to have a
that
piece of paper.
MSBA
Oh, yeah,
spreadsheets, it's up
absolutely.
there.
Just so you know you're.
You're talking
Definitely.
specific extra costs of that?
Yeah, 'cause
Right,
it's
so
like 3,000 or 4,000
it-
feet.
Right, it's from my recollection of the meeting that the conversation we had with the SBC was that it has to do with the gymnasium, it has to do with the stages larger.
The cafeteria.
The cafetorium.
Right.
The cafetorium and the basketball courts, those are, they chose, as he said, the middle of the road size gym. There's
Right.
like the smallest gym and then there's the largest gym. They went kind of middle of the road due to community feedback. So it was those things. I know that, they've talked about that in comparison to what other towns generally have for non-reimbursed items, because they made things bigger. We have a very small grouping of them,
Right.
but we have gotten a lot of questions about that.
Right, no, I think that's.
And then there's other
those are
things,
good questions.
there's other things like they're just arbitrary caps. So
Mhm.
it's just like they only reimburse,
Right.
there's no logic behind it,
Yeah.
just like, we only give you 8% of site costs.
Well,
So-
yeah,
so everybody's gonna get 8%.
someone explained
Everybody's
to
gonna
me,
go over.
someone explained to me that the size of the elementary school auditorium, gymnasium is like St. Edwards. All right.
Oh,
so
how big their gym is in
that's how
there.
big, if you want to see what you'll get, it's that. So they had, so how you go through the process, I think, is a couple of things. One is, it's suggested that there's an educational benefit because you can conduct 2 classes at the same time.
Right.
All
Yes,
right.
right.
The
yes.
second was the elementary school gymnasium does not have bleachers. So if you want to have bleachers, and it was advocated by the principal, for example, that you could have a school
Assembly.
assembly
if they had
with this in the
bleachers.
gymnasium with bleachers. That's another decision you can make. And of course, the third one was, right now, basketball program, but I remember meeting with, Park and Rec, in saying, that was one of the advocacies for a Park and Rec building, because right now our kids have to drive to Wellesley and, so I guess the question is, and I think that's in the broader context of the community benefit for additional costs. So, kind of set in my mind, because I separate, okay, you get to school, so you get the St. Edward's gym. Then you get those other 2 pieces, right, for the education side. And do you just say, okay, we'll just keep on driving to Wellesley? I mean, I presume Wellesley doesn't give it to us free, right? So, I mean, so that's that's a factual analysis from my perspective, that you get, that, because it's, to your point, Steve, it's how big the gym is and how much the MSBA allows.
Right.
So
Right.
when you say so it's gonna cost us, if it's 3,600 feet for the gym and 673 feet for the stage. And you multiply that by the cost per square foot, it's like $2.4 million. So you wanna cut $2.4 million on, you say, keep on going to Wellesley, and no assemblies will be held at that school, and you have one, visit class at a time. I mean, how you make those judgments, but that's what contributes to it, right?
Yeah.
So how do you look at that? You argue it's worth it, it's not.
Well, I mean, I think it is, we're just gonna put the.
We're just putting facts out right now.
That's what I'm
We'll
saying.
have that argument in
Yeah.
November.
I'm not having the argument, exactly,
No.
but I mean,
In my
presenting it in
sense,
that manner, I think
Yeah.
that's, so you just like, wait a minute, we're not building a Boston Garden here.
Well, and I think the document with those details would be important, the insurance and the meeting minutes, the meetings, like talking through their decision around that, so we could link to that.
Yeah.
Just as a reminder,
Yeah, the
if
big-
you wanna
the
go
big-
hear how they deliberate.
Yeah,
Yeah, the big issues around, that we've talked about are documented in the minutes.
Yeah.
What they thought
yeah,
about
so we
it,
just need to
why.
figure out which
Like which
day they
one?
talked about that, so we can
It's,
link those.
yeah, it's more, it's like in the last couple months, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, well, they actually cut back
yeah,
on the gym size,
Right.
and a part of the reason that they cut back,
the minutes.
they also cut back on the bleachers. Because the size of the bleachers will dictate the amount of parking spaces you need.
As well as
So
the
they
size
actually-
of the bathroom.
So it's documented in the minutes.
Yeah.
That they cut back on the bleachers and the size of the gym, so they would cut back on the number of parking spots. So I mean, it's a,
It must have been one of them, they were going through the budget,
Yeah, it was, I think, a couple months ago where they were going through.
like that first house.
Alright, so
We'll
we'll
actually, I
figure
don't
out
think it
which
was,
one.
I don't think it was budget, I think it was design.
Oh, was it?
I think it was in the design.
Well, it's after the final cost numbers came in,
Yeah.
and then they do this MSBA reimbursement thing at the very end, so it's fairly recent, in the last couple months, I just can't remember which date it was.
Alright, well, we'll figure that out. So I guess related to the numbers, so the next are kind of like other issues. So the financial review, obviously, there's a budget inside the schematic design report. This is a very, very long document that is very unfortunately not bookmarked in the PDF. Anybody else notice that and get a little crazed? I am not positive what page number it starts on yet. I asked, Anime was reaching out to Arrow Street to see if we could either get the bookmarks fixed or at least point us to some page numbers.
What are you talking about now?
To this.
Which are you
I'm
referring to?
talking about, so in the schematic design report,
1,300
Oh, the
pages.
ST.
the really
Big doc.
super long one that has no bookmarks.
Yeah,
They should correct,
Yeah.
1,300
or just
pages.
general.
it's almost 2,000 pages, so.
Yeah, because if you go to the earlier PDFs, when you open them up on the site, there are very helpful bookmarks.
Mhm.
The 1,400 page document does not have bookmarks.
Well, maybe they, I mean, it just got finished last week, so maybe.
So, yeah.
So maybe they'll do that.
I've submitted a request for some bookmarks and hopefully if that gets changed, we'll fix the link to the one with the bookmarks. Which is why I have like a highlight there for the page number, because I feel like in that report, it would be good to highlight that for people.
132
Oh, thank you.
is the total project budget.
Well, that's not the page. Oh, that's just the total part, not the, on page
Or you're
132?
asking- yeah.
Yes, okay.
But this
It is not the physical page 132, it's the, as you page into the report.
Okay.
What's the PDF page?
That's what I'm saying.
It's
It's
just
some
the
appendix.
PDF.
It's the
on cost
PDF
estimates
page.
as well.
Yeah,
Okay,
And the
that's probably what we have to tell people.
it's the
Yes.
narrative.
yeah.
page 1,539.
There's no-
What was that?
Page
1,000.
1,539
Really have it?
is the OPM.
You're not
cost
kidding?
estimate.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. We
I'm
could
not
all
sure if
bookmark
that's
it
in this
because none of us
document.
have.
I'm not sure all the
Cost.
appendices are included in this PDF.
You know, well,
Alright, so,
It should be.
while we're on the cost topic,
Yeah.
the financial topic, you know, there's, I sort of learned this, I think, when I'm talking to Mike, that there's sort of, you know, there's sort of a, they go through and they develop these estimates based upon two cost estimators, and they have to reconcile their numbers. So there's two people looking at it, and then they have to reconcile.
Independent firms.
Independent firms, right? They're independent firms, they reconcile their numbers, and then these are just estimates, right? So at the schematic design point in time. Then, and they're based upon a construction manager at risk approach.
Right.
So there's two approaches. There's the design, bid, and build. So you put it, you design, you put it out to bid, and you get a, you know what your cost is.
Right.
The construction manager at risk approach sort of, it's always more expensive because they're taking on that risk that, you know, the prices might change, and so there's a premium built into the CMR pricing. And so if it goes to the next phase, right, it gets approved, and then they go out to they have to make a decision whether they're gonna put it out to bid or use a CMR
Right.
approach. It's a big decision.
At that time.
I think it's one of the biggest decisions.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean, we were talking about this, the differences can be significant.
So when,
And you're betting on, you know, because keep in mind, all these estimates were done during probably one of the most inflationary periods we've had
Right.
in years. Like the last 9 months, right? So where that's gonna go over the next year and a half, that's the decision they have to make.
Yeah.
Do they think there's gonna be, people are gonna be hungry and bid on the project and fight over it? In which case they might, get a big discount to what these CMR prices are. Or do they think there's gonna be more inflation, in which case they're.
Which the CMI builds in inflation.
Yes, and they
It
take
doesn't
on
build
that
in.
risk, basically, so.
Right.
so question about that, the CMR approach, when they're actually going to source the subs and contractors are gonna do the work? Are they just going with what they know, or how does that work? I mean, if they're not getting the bid process done, do they just pick one and go with it?
You probably know this.
There still is a vetting process with CMR at risk where you're selecting qualified competent contractors. So there, the prime, your prime CMR contractor or consultant is still gonna do a process to vet subcontractors, just like design bid build.
But they
But
might
you're not
keep
bidding
some
the
of that
whole
savings for
project, you're-
themselves, right? Is that
Correct,
right?
yeah, and
Okay,
CMR
that's
at
what
risk,
I'm trying to
you're
get at.
kind of bidding the
What's the
project
difference?
before it's fully designed in a way.
Maybe in increments,
Yeah,
like agile
right.
methodology and.
So it's
IT
most
development.
useful when you have a site where you want to get some advanced site work done, early in the process or something, that might.
And they emphasize
drive the
that,
CMR
that
at
they could
risk.
release some design documents early on, get a bid.
Yeah.
And maybe even start work and then go on to the next phase.
So it gives
But
you
the reason
better bit of time.
the reason I sort of came upon this is I was looking at some. The MSBR or MSBA website has all this history of school projects. Pricing at different stages, so they have the pricing for the project as of schematic design. And then you could look and see, once it got approved and moved forward, what the design bid build price came in at. Or if they kept with the CMR, you can see what that was. And, as you would expect, there was not that big of a difference between the two. So the two CMR prices between at the schematic design phase versus, the construction phase. But the design bid build had significant, it was like, in some cases, 20% differences.
More or less, less.
Less.
Yeah.
Yeah, and range was like 6 to 20.
Yeah.
So I mean, those are big numbers when you talk about, the size.
I mean, there's a whole lot more data on, the traditional process, design bid build than there is CMR risk. So there's not as much data to compare to as well, but for the few projects that have done CMR risk, they tend to be a little bit more expensive, but
Yeah,
the owners see a benefit in doing in that method. That's why
Yeah.
the option exists.
right.
And I think that the discussion that I've heard and there in the minutes is the benefit that comes from having Mike Quinlan and Tim
Yes.
Bonaparte
Yeah.
and their professional experience, that they look at this site and said, it is not, the site is not a high-risk site and the design is not a high-risk design. I think, as you mentioned
Yeah.
earlier, the risk is in the inflation and the COVID environment,
Right.
pricing of materials. But Mike and I think has said, I think publicly in the minutes, that he can't, he doesn't, I don't know if they voted, I think they did vote on it, actually. They did decide which way to go, and I think it was based upon both he and Tim's professional judgment and the judgment, because there's other people on the committee that have this experience. And I think, so they're assessing the site as being kind of a low risk, because there's already a school on it, and flats, things of those.
Yeah, they seem to think it's not a tricky place to build, I guess.
It's a green field,
Yeah,
literally.
but I came across this because some of the questions that have come in, people want to compare. They're doing their own research, they're looking up school costs and all that, and so they want to compare a final cost of a school that was a design bid build cost to our cost today, which is schematic design.
And it's years later.
It's years later, and in some cases, as we know, there's this big discount, that happens, so it's a tricky area, that's all. I just keep
Like I
that in
said,
mind.
to answer those questions, you really have to go into the detail
Yeah.
of what's inside the building, what kind of finishing, what kind of this, what kind of that,
Yeah.
how expensive is this
Right.
versus that. And it's a huge endeavor just to compare just Westwood down the street is building one.
Yeah,
Right.
And just to compare the two, it's a big
Yeah.
project.
And that's the process that you also referenced to that was it engineering
Value engineering.
value engineering process. I mean, they go through 3 scenarios. And they went through, and it's, as you're very well aware, it's probably a 3 or 4 page document, and it lines it out, and some are saying, okay, we'll take them out, you know, there's like 3 scenarios that they have. And the last one is, and the second one is, yeah, we can do it, because materials and what have you, because, you know, Tim and Mike are very familiar with it, so they know quality, and they know price, and they know where to put it. But they went to the level of saying, okay, if it's exposed, we'll put this in, but if it's not exposed, you know, if you don't see it, we can do this because it's as good, but it may not be as visually pleasing, as it were, you know. So they really have, but there must be over 150, I think, items lined up that they went through.
And one of the things maybe we could look at, Christine, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I assume they're gonna schedule out sort of the funding side of this in terms of when Mike Quinlan will somehow put some cash flow requirements together and they'll schedule that out. But at town meeting, you know, we're gonna bond this, we're gonna vote to bond this, whatever the amount is. Like, is it the lower number or
Yeah.
the 63 million? And that's based upon the CMR pricing. So if it comes in lower, we just, before we issue bonds, we'll know, I guess. is
We'll
what
know.
you're saying. We'll know that you don't need to borrow the 63 if it's lower, you can borrow something less than that.
It depends.
Yeah.
It depends on the cash flow statements coming in prior to that. It depends on when we're gonna borrow. We're still trying to work through. Once we get the cash flow statement from Medfield, we'll know when we have to start spending the money. That'll determine how and when we're going to borrow.
Yep. Okay.
And you're anticipating one borrowing? Not
That's
serious.
what we're looking at now. And we can't make a final decision on that until we get the cash flow statement. Obviously, you all know that our bond rating was reaffirmed at the AA1.
Oh, yes, we should have started.
I'm sorry, have I shouted that out enough? Obviously, the interest market is very interesting right now, the borrowing. So we're trying to figure out and determine what the best possible route is, whether or not it's one borrowing. If it's a ban for the first part of the project, then the second part. So we're still working through all of that.
Sorry, off track, I guess.
We're never off track. We were just talking about costs for a long time.
Okay.
All good. Okay, so then the next grouping is water and sewer. So there's several different documents here. The one repeat document is from the public forum presentation. It goes on pages 4 and 5. They had done a lot about the water issue on that. But, and then there's the elementary school FAQ on the well protection district that was done. The town stormwater management plan, the swap report for Medfield, the aquifer protection district bylaws, Mass DEP Medfield Zone 2, Medfield aquifer protection district. I think that's a map.
That's a GIS map.
It's a GIS map. The Medfield Wellhead Protection District, the 2,000 feet for the Elm Street wells, I think that was also a map, or is that the document?
That's a GIS
It's a
map.
map, yeah.
I
And
did
then,
have a question on that map, just who, maybe the author of it, I might need to direct a question there. Typically, zone ones are 400 feet. I'm just curious as to why the 2,000 feet was used. It's certainly a lot more conservative.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have the history to that. It was done, I do remember being at a town meeting where we voted these new aquifer protection district bylaws into our, there's, as far as I can tell, there's no requirement in the state law for it.
This Mass DEP has regulations that dictate that zone 1 should be a 400-foot
400
radius.
feet,
Right.
right.
So anyway, the map shows a 2,000-foot radius, which is
But that is
much
not-
more conservative, which is
yeah.
safer.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Just curious if there was a rationale that 2,000 feet was used.
I mean, as you know, Medfield's very unique in terms of, our zone 2, I don't know if there's other towns that have 70% of their town covered as by zone two, but maybe there is. But I think, I don't know, I don't know the answer about why they did what they did. But keep in mind that they probably want, I'm sure they wanted to be conservative.
Yeah.
And then they also needed it to work for all the wells, because it's a bylaw, it's a zoning bylaw, so they probably had to, they could have done 400, but, I'm assuming 400 works for all our wells, but, 2,000 probably works for all our wells, so. I mean, theoretically, as I understand it, you could draw this radius for all of zone two. You could make all of Medfield a well protection district, which doesn't make
Yeah,
sense.
what
to
I'm
me.
zeroing in on the zone
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
The zone one, Mass DEP regulations call out 400 feet.
400 feet,
And
right,
the maps presented, it's shown as 2,000 feet.
right.
Just curious if there's a reason why.
Well, okay, so maybe you're talking about in the GIS. There is two things you can click on. One is a 400-foot zone, and the other one is the well protection district, and it shows both circles. The problem is the 400-foot zone is outside of the well protection 2,000-foot zone, so that doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's
So
like drawing.
I
No,
think
but they're
that-
both, they're concentric circles, so that wouldn't, the radius is from the wellhead point. Yeah, we can talk about this.
No, because it came up as a question.
Yeah.
Somebody asked it, and
Sarah can walk you through it.
Yeah.
yeah, and basically, I think there's an issue with the.
I mean, the bottom line is what's presented is a lot more conservative than
Yes.
my understanding of what a zone one is.
And that's what, is that what you usually see?
400.
400 feet, okay. Natick has that in their rules.
No, it's the Mass DEP's drinking water
Yeah.
regulations.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So does Natick have higher standard? Like 2,000 feet?
So what I'm talking about, zone one radius, and then zone two is not necessarily a radius. It's the zone two is the contributory aquifer to that well
Yeah.
field under a certain extreme pumping event.
Right. Right, this is called the well protection district, it's not called a zone one.
There is also that, there's a zone one, there's a zone two, and there's a aquifer protection district, there's all three.
Yeah, in Medfield, we have a fourth, so we have an aquifer protection district. We have a zone one, which is 400 feet. And we have a well protection district, which is 2,000 feet.
Which we call zone one.
That's my point. These maps are
Yes.
calling it zone one as a 2,000-foot radius,
It's
whereas.
Medfield zone one versus the.
It's in our bylaws, it gets confusing, because in our bylaws, we call it a zone one. That's why it's marked that way on the map. But
But it's a
for
Medfield
state,
zone, not a
it's a
state.
it's a
Yeah.
Medfield interpreted zone one.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
We're
I know. it's
trying to
confusing.
Complicated
Yeah,
and confusing apparently.
townhouse, town hall. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Schmeasel, schmazel. Okay, and then the last one here was the drinking water regulations. So those were all the different ones we had on water and sewer. For traffic. So for traffic, again, the public forum presentation has some information on traffic. There was also a specific traffic update at an SBC meeting, March 24th, 2021, so that's from that. And then there was a traffic impact study that was done that is inside of the schematic design report. And then I have tossed in here there was a traffic study that was done back for the 2016 town meeting that was on the intersection of 27 and South. The only reason I'm suggesting we toss this in there is because there's been a lot of discussion about the fact that the traffic study that was done during COVID, and it's not necessarily, thank you, right, that's a good one, representative of the times. The only other traffic study that I know of in town that was done in that general area was this other one that was done at that intersection of 27 and South that had to do with when the town was evaluating whether or not to put another stoplight there, which did not pass at town meeting that year. And so I had a PDF of that, so I kind of tossed that in as a another information point, I guess,
Just
about traffic in that,
Yeah.
just historical traffic information, so,
makes sense.
was not necessarily used in this process, but is a town document anyway. So, then for sidewalks and busing, actually, we talked about this when Christine was here, but specifically, I got 2 more documents today, which are on this list. One was the list of the safety streets from the school system. So I have that I'll send around for everyone to see. And the safety streets they sent me, and they sent me a snippet from the busing contract that talked about the fact that they have a 4 hours, and that what we discussed earlier about the routes and the way that they're done. And so they sent that. Then we also have in the public forum presentation on page 9, they had talked about that. And that's where the sidewalk map, and I think they might have the radiuses in them too for both areas in that public forum presentation. And then Mo provided us with his draft of what is a sidewalk inventory / conditions map. So the way that his is different is that the one that was presented at the SPC just shows the sidewalks. Mo's actually gives a sidewalk a rating of a green, yellow, or red based on its condition. And you can see in Mo's map whether or not sidewalks are on both sides of the street or one. And then I had also asked him as a kind of question on kind of the paving of the roads, how he prioritizes, and are they from a safety issue, prioritizing which roads get paved first in his repaving. And so he did provide me with what he called the cost benefit value analysis pavement management. So it rates the different streets in town, and then it actually talks a little bit about kind of where they rank and how they would do it from a rehab perspective. Because then you can see if there are streets, like as an example, they just did West Street. And so West Street is very highly traveled. It's a big cut through kind of street. And so I was curious as, how does he decide? Like, because I would think that they're done based on how often you're using them and things like that. So whether or not that really is something that somebody would completely take into account, I guess I'm not sure. But I have to-
Sometimes too much information.
It could be, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that definitely is not a direct thing, but it is
Right.
something that he sent me. Which we can either put in there or not.
It would, I know we're on a different topic
That's
now,
okay.
but just on this CMR versus design bid built in, we probably should have a meeting with Mike to understand that better.
I think that's a good, that was
Yeah.
kind of like what I wanted to kind of recap at the
Yeah.
end, is what meetings do we want to have
Yeah,
that we need more info on?
because there's a lot of confusion, I think, in some people's mind on that. I don't quite understand it myself.
I agree. All right, so then the next section has to do with Park and Rec, because it keeps coming up as a topic. And so as I kind of had mentioned at the beginning, we have scheduled a meeting on September 23rd that is going to be a topic around Dale on a few different areas. So the way that this one feeds into this, there's the piece of, there's been talk about Park and Rec potentially moving into Dale if the school moves down to Elm. So in relation to that, that was mentioned in the public forum presentation on June 13th. So that, again, document is here. There is also a feasibility study that was done by Park and Rec that talks about their different options. They provided those documents, or Kevin provided those documents to Amanda and Jill in their research. So I don't know if either of you want to talk a little bit at all about the documents that you guys got from Kevin. How you doing up there, Amanda?
Jill, where are you going? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I didn't know if you wanted to start.
I mean, I can start and then you can make sure you keep me honest. And then fill in, because I know I've missed a few conversations, but yeah, I think, the documents that we've received from Kevin, I mean, look, I think it's evident that the discussion around Parks and Rec and what's going to happen has been going on for a while. I mean, you'll see a good bit of the data that's been posted is from 2017. And so it's a discussion that's been on the table. There was a feasibility study and I've had conversations as well, and he'll certainly fill you in when he comes in, but looking at the various options, whether it's moving into the Dale facility or looking elsewhere. The impression that I got was really that Dale would probably appear to be the less expensive option for Park and Rec, at least in the short term, and the goal is long-term, right? So kind of move in, do some minimalistic repairs. He threw out a figure, but I'll kind of let him really speak to that, because I don't think he was at a level to be quoted on, but he can certainly speak to that. With the understanding that we would probably need to kind of go in and make more investment in upscaling the building over time. And I think his goal was really to move into the first floor essentially, so that the building had options for other groups to utilize some of the facility. The other thing that he was considering, if Dale wasn't the option to move into and the schools stayed within the Dale building, would be to look over across from the state hospital. So not taking up Sledding Hill, but that area. And he has looked into some studies there as well. I think the thought is that it could be costlier, and it's not in the downtown area. And so he did run a survey in 2020, I think January 2020, where he was kind of looking at the utilization of Parks and Rec and some of the preferences and priorities of the people within the town as it relates to Parks and Rec. A lot of the use really is around camps and the younger ages. And in our discussions, I know he's been kind of maxing out and has wait lists on a lot of the programs. And so he felt like the downtown area is really important with Parks and Rec. And I think some of the survey kind of revealed that was some of the priority there. And the ability to expand to other age groups, I think, was another kind of area you start to see within the survey, so that there could be more offered. I'm going to pause. Jill, do you want to kind of add to the summary that I've been articulating so far?
I think that covers it really well. I think he's got his own ideas and how they can work the Dale building, but with them coming next week, I'd let them speak to that. But those were some of the questions that we were speaking with him about, just where are they now versus that feasibility study in 2017 process for them to move forward, short-term and long-term goals for Park and Rec. And that's one of the things that we could probably add to the list here, because I didn't see it, but the community survey results.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And I can make sure you have that. Just, it's interesting actually where people prioritized what they would want, but the location, central location is one of them. So, and then I think the need for just more community space for them and how they can expand the program. I think he's got some really neat ideas around what they could do. So, but I don't think, I think they're working out. It sounded like they were working out something, but wasn't ready for prime time, but I'm sure they'll be able to speak to it next week.
Okay, sounds good. And then I guess to that end, there's also, and we're going to cover this in the discussion next week. I've asked a variety of people to come to be able, because we've had some other questions about basically who gets to decide what happens with Dale, and also if nothing, if this doesn't pass, you know, what kind of deferred maintenance on Dale will have to get done that hasn't been getting done, and so there's costs associated with that, so I think there's been a variety of questions that have been posed to us about kind of deferred maintenance costs, like what happens if it fails, what happens if it passes,
Right.
all of those kinds of things, so, believe that, Amy Collar and Mike Francesca are gonna come to be able to talk about some of the maintenance costs of the building if it fails, so people can understand that and how it changes or doesn't. If a park and rec or somebody else went into that building, so we can have that discussion a bit more in depth next week, as well as what exactly the process is if the vote passes to decide who gets to use Dale and how much, whether or not that's boards in town that decide versus a town vote. I think we need to understand the answers to that question.
That'd be great
Too.
additions, yeah, to
Yeah.
that conversation.
And so I've kind of heard bits and pieces, but I decided it'd be good to just get everybody in a room and
There's a
get
separate,
those answers.
it
to
shows,
those
it shows you
questions.
how little I know. There's a separate commission that oversees Park and Rec.
There is,
Yes.
Okay.
they're elected every couple of years.
Yeah.
But there is, and, but
And their authority is basically over,
basically over Kevin, I would say, in that, you know, Kevin explains to them what he wants to do and they say yes or no, kind of thing.
to the budget, basically, spending, do they have authority over, does that commission decide what money gets spent and how? Like the school.
But you
committee?
still approve the town meeting.
Yeah.
Right, but they help develop the,
They have input,
Mhm.
but not final. Okay.
correct,
So both salary and operating costs that we see as a warrant committee,
not salary. Salary set by the personnel plan.
okay.
Yeah.
But the operating cost for Park and Rec, they might have some
They may have some.
oversight or
Yeah.
some input, but certainly programming and fees for programming they
Correct.
have in a big way,
And policies.
right?
Okay,
Right, like I think like if Kevin wanted to do a policy about whether or not he was gonna charge a different amount for a program for a resident versus a non-resident,
That bring it to them. And-
that's a commission question.
And Park and Recreation has their own rules and regulations in terms of enforcement for their properties. That kind of thing.
okay.
We're gonna have a fun fall.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long meeting.
Yeah, okay, so then the next one, we talked about this a bit, about how they're hard to compare, but there's been so much discussions out there for how to compare. There is, through the MSBA, they do have a tool on their masschoolbuildings.org website that you can look at kind of other projects out there and where they are, so I mean, that's more of like a tool that people could use to try to make their own opinion, but then I think that goes back to maybe having another discussion with Mike Quinlan about the best way to do these comparisons, because
Yeah.
when I've seen online, people comparing the Needham project, and then we know that there's the current Westwood project, there's a current project going on in Ashland, there's all these different ones out there.
Yeah, and the big thing I learned is there's this lag time
Mhm.
in the whole MSBA process between when you do, like our own cost estimates that were done at the PSR stage are a year old now.
Yeah.
Now we have the SD numbers and we know what's happened in between there.
Mhm.
But then there's this other, once you get approved, there's another year for you to actually do the detailed
Mhm.
design and then come up with the real cost numbers.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, there's a difference in that. So I think, you know, it's confusing and we need to have a discussion about what's the best way to do that
do that.
comparison, I guess. Like, should we do the comparison at this point instead of, you know, should we do an apples to apples, just schematic design
Just
costs?
schematic,
Yeah,
That's all we have as a town.
right?
So,
but we have a meeting on, our next meeting as a group is on the 28th, but that's also a joint meeting with the selectmen and the SBC about the budget. I don't know if people are what do people think about seeing if Mike is available before that and have like a meeting for 45 minutes or something before to be able to talk about that topic before We go into the larger cost meeting if he's available.
What do you think?
And it would be starting
Carbon
early.
cost comparison, absolutely.
Yeah,
Would there be time to tackle the CMR at risk?
well, like, I mean, it's like, let's say if we
Is it
started our
12?
meeting at 6, like, we would have an hour with Mike to talk about that stuff too. Would people be okay with starting early that night? Rather than adding in another night into our mix, maybe just, or is it a problem?
I just need.
Oh, on the 28th, so,
28th.
because if we already have that joint meeting, does it cause big, owl or technology problems for us to start a meeting an hour early?
No, because you're doing a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, it'll be on Medfield TV. We won't be using the owl for that evening.
Okay,
So,
so if we
and
wanted,
they can come earlier for that.
I was gonna say, yeah, and if it was a problem to be in here, like if we just were down in like the Warrant Committee room or something
Totally
like
fine.
that, and then came up?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Okay. So we can do that.
6 o'clock that night.
Yes, we'll start at 6 o'clock that night instead.
With Mike.
Well, provided Mike can come.
Yeah.
So, I'll circle back. Hopefully, we know he's busy at 7, so hopefully he doesn't want to eat dinner with his family.
Well, he does have another life besides this, he has a job. I think keeps him.
It's somewhere
he
out
goes to-
there.
he goes
Somewhere
a lot
out
of
there he
meetings at
has a life.
nighttime, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, and so then I know it's already 9 o'clock, but in the interest of finishing, everybody okay if we keep going for a little bit? So then the next other topics, some of these will probably go by pretty quickly. But there's been a lot of talk. So the next topic is the Medfield State Hospital. So I put a link there for the redevelopment proposals, just because there's been a lot of. I mean, what does that mean? And I don't think any of us necessarily know what it means, but there are 2 proposals out there now to at least begin to start to try to digest and determine, I guess, in our own minds, how we think that that affects what people are saying about enrollment. I think for me, that's the biggest thing that kind of speaks to.
Yeah, I think as I understand it, it's very much at a negotiation stage now.
Yeah.
That committee that's charged with that is trying to work through the 2 proposals and go back to each and basically try to get the best deal for the town. So in that process, the number of units might change, which will drive the impact on the schools. And there is, in one proposal, there was quite a bit of alignment with what was in our master plan, the zoning up there. The other one was wildly, outside that, but so there's 2 different pictures that they can look at. So the one that's closest, they did do a fiscal impact study. It's if you go, it's at the very end, it's an appendix. And they did estimate the impact for all the different departments in town, the additional cost. And for schools, they looked at a couple other what they think are similar complexes and what the number of school kids that came out of those were. But they also looked at the park here in Medfield, and they looked at sort of the school impact from that project. At any rate, they've come up with, I think it's like 70 additional children that would, based on the 334 units, I think.
In the master, right?
Yeah, and they're just looking at 2 and 3 bedrooms. So they exclude out the 334, they took out the single bedrooms, and then they looked at the 2 and 3. And they did a calculation, basically.
That was in one of the.
And one of the proposals,
Right.
the other proposal, the other proposal that had the 700 units, so it was big.
The one that's gonna make it that none of us are gonna
So
have
do I.
property
Yeah,
taxes anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that one, they didn't even bother to do a fiscal, I couldn't find it in there, but.
So the wild card there, when you do that, you have 70 children, but where are they? Are they all in the 8th grade? Are they all spread?
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, you just don't know.
Yeah,
You
So
don't know.
that's the big wild card.
Yeah.
Well, I
And
think,
the
I
cost.
think from my perspective, the broader question is, how do you integrate the dynamics of change
That's right.
into this consideration, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we're looking at 50, a school for 50 years,
Mhm.
right? And I think that, there's been a lot presented saying School's too big, it's projecting way beyond where we are. And so there's gonna be, and certainly the person who's paying real estate taxes in 2021 really isn't too concerned about what the real estate tax, what the benefit's gonna be in 2060, okay, I get that. But there are a number of items like this. The state hospital is the most obvious. But, that building that's going up on the American Legion property is a pretty good sized building.
I don't think it's bigger every day. I
Yeah.
drive by it twice a
It's
day
not
every
getting
day.
smaller, but I mean, so that my point, the point I'm trying to make is, I think this is a category, that needs to be addressed, which is the change that's coming, some that we see, and how does that fit into?
Yeah, like for example, there's not just the American Legion, there's the one at the corner of Dale and 27 there, I forget what it's called.
Medfield Meadows.
Medfield Meadows. There's a number of them, what they've done up at the
Exactly.
hospital, those are not apartments, but those are more.
Yeah.
So that there's gonna be impact from those on the school.
Sure, I mean, the building that, the building that they're doing down at the tavern there, at the meeting we were at last Thursday morning, the woman, Mrs. Foley, I think her name is, was talking, about Elm Street and the development that's being contemplated there, that's being proposed there. I mean, change is constant.
Yeah.
And I just think that while we can, the Medfield State Hospital project in and of itself will certainly not be, I'd be shocked if it were, determined, in terms of time for November. But I think it's, again, I'm talking about a category, so somehow to address that big category, because there's pieces here and there that are gonna impact the changes in the town.
Mhm. Great. For the next two links, the ones we've already talked about tonight, the townwide master plan. So there's both the master plan and then there's a kind of more like a summary PDF called the interview handout. Both of these are on the town website, but these are just those PDFs. From a topic of sustainability and net zero, there's an energy and net zero assessment document that's on the elementary school website was on there. That's the PDF that talks about that. And then the last two sections, I kind of call these one is the history of the Wheelock site and one is the history of the Dale and Pfaff site. For the history of the Wheelock site, that's where I decided to put the oil question. I wasn't really sure where to put that. So I put that there, and then there's also an archaeological survey that was done that has to do with the SPC. That's on the SPC website. I didn't have any other documents that had shown itself to me necessarily about the Wheelock site. And then from a Dale perspective, there's three very old, or I guess two very, very old documents, one from 1914 and one from 1950, if you want to see some historic
I
stuff.
saw them, those are interesting.
They're interesting. The reason why I suggested that we include them is because I feel like whenever there is a discussion about what to do with Dale or what to do with the Pfaff, I always feel like there's a caveat undercurrent. Well, when it was deeded to the town, it had restrictions. And so I'm like, well, what are those restrictions? Well, they're outlined in those documents. So those two documents really kind of speak to the municipal use that has to be used for that, because there has been topic of, well, is somebody gonna, knock that down and put a grocery store? We can't do that. It has to be a municipal use. So that's really all those are there for. Plus they're fun to look
It has
at.
to have the
They're
name-
old and
has
it
to
has
have the name
stamps.
Pfaff in it.
That's right.
But can it be knocked down?
I believe so, yes. Yeah, and then, because there's another document that I put on there from 2014, because they had to get special permission to put that parking lot
Yeah,
between the FAF and the Dale when they put up the public safety building, so.
I think it could be knocked down based on what I
As long
read.
as they call it fast.
So as I
As
call
long
it
as we can call it
the
the
fat
fat corner or
parking lot or
something like
whatever
that.
they want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's interesting, because I mean, whatever it talks about, it was really kind of like a farm property over there, so. For a historian buffs, those are good documents. And then the last ones I put in there, which I think will become part of our discussion next week, has to do with the projected cost of capital. And so for anybody that really wants to read the really long facilities report that was done in 2017, there's a link to that PDF, and I did call out that on page 95 is the information about the FAF, and on page 201 is where Dale Street starts. And so that really kind of speaks to, if those buildings stay there as is, these are the capital projects that have to get done to just maintain the buildings. It's a straight line maintain.
That's in the capital plan.
Mhm. Right, and so there's basically the one large PDF, and then there's the capital project list that was done for the town that goes FY 21 to 26. It's more in a spreadsheet format. And then there's the capital project list, and there's the municipal stabilization list. So that rounds out
For some reason, the links are blocked.
that. They won't be on the real website. It might be because I was trying to share some PDFs through a Google Doc that I might not have given you, yeah. But what Nick is gonna do is that there's a document center on the town Medfield website that he's going to put these PDFs in that document center. So if somebody went online and went to the document center, they're gonna find a folder about this project, and then it's gonna have all these documents in the PDFs. The other thing that is gonna exist is that if you go to the Medfield site and you go to the Warrant Committee page, right now our Warrant Committee page just says who we are and has a couple of links about our agenda and our minutes. There will be a page there or a link there that will talk about the fact that we're doing this warrant article, and it will basically have this list with the links. By doing it that way, it does give us the opportunity to add this verbiage about the page numbers.
Yeah.
Which you can't do in the document center, it's just a straight PDFs. But if we put it in this outline format, we can at least point out page numbers per se. And then also on that page, we can link to specific websites. When in the document center, it has to be a PDF. So when we want to send somebody directly to the MSBA website or something like that, that's just gonna have to be an outer link.
So Sharon,
Yeah.
so what's the plan then to sort of operational to actually get to that point, I guess, so.
So Nick is being our super duper friend on this, and so
I mean, I guess the question is, we're gonna kind of put something up. Then we always have the ability to add stuff later on.
absolutely, yes.
And
And
then-
so I think that if we have consensus that these documents that we've gone through tonight are okay to go, then what Nick is going to do is he's gonna finish up the document center and he'll put this tree on the warrant website, and it will just go live.
Yeah.
And then
So do you want a motion?
probably, yes. And so then the idea is that, then let's say when we meet again, the next time, if somebody has uncovered another document they want to add, then we'll motion to add that one
Yeah.
up to. Does that sound okay, people?
Yeah.
All right. Would you like to make a motion?
So I move that we, approve this list of documents in the glossary outline for approval to go up on the website.
Second.
All right. I'll start with you, Nick.
Yes.
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 And Amanda?
Yes.
I also vote yes. All right, so we will get mixed up on this because it's not like he has anything else to do.
No, he's wide open.
He's wide open, I know. This is what Christine was gone one day. I stopped by and talked to Nick by myself, and she probably came back and she was like, you want her to do what with them? That is what happened. So for next kind of steps and what we want to do, so We have coming up, as I said, so next week we have the meeting on the 23rd at 7. That's going to be about the future and the costs surrounding Dale, with a variety of guests. And so that we're gonna post as both a subcommittee and more committee meeting, so that it's one of those things that if you can come, great, but if we don't have quorum, if the 4 of us are here from the subcommittee, I don't think we have a specific room yet to do that. Do we know
I
if we're
think
doing
we're
that
gonna
here?
be in here.
I think we're gonna be in
I
here,
think we're gonna be
okay,
in here.
right. And then, so on the 28th, we'll see if we can start at 6, and see if Mike Quinlan can come to talk about our questions with how to compare costs. So we'll do that for an hour, and then we're gonna have the joint meeting with the selectmen. And then on the 4th of October, that even though it's the week that Bob's daughter is getting married, he was willing to meet on Monday, but not later in the week. Is that still true, Bob? Is your wife and daughter going to get angry at you? Right, okay, and so I think that that meeting will just be more recap and more review of facts than anything else that has come up. I think that that will be our main thing, and then I'm just tossing out there based on when people were available, that maybe we just hold October 14th as a date if we think we need another one. And we'll just see how things go. And then we'll shoot for the 26th of October to do that kind of warrant hearing, which we can talk about as it gets closer. I think that as the weeks get on, I think the selectmen are going to start to talk about when they would have a meeting, but I think that our schedule is going to fall in with that. I know that there's a lot of questions that were out there. Is there a way to just get us copies of those in the interest of time? To
Yes.
add to our question list
Absolutely.
and circulated to everyone?
Yep.
Why don't we do that, just in the interest of time, everything that was in the Q&A? And then at one of these upcoming meetings, we'll go through the questions that we got, make sure we covered them all. And we can include the stuff in the Q&A for tonight. That's not good. Does anybody else have anything else they wanted to cover tonight? All right, well, thank you guys very much. This has been, I know, a lot to ask of everybody's time to do it, but I like to think that people are at least appreciating that we're doing it. I know, right?
I've actually heard a lot of positive feedback. Sorry, I've heard a lot of positive feedback actually about the amount of effort that's going into this process and the clerk.
Yes, I mean, I have to, and I do think that it has been, I do think it has been good. And I've definitely learned a lot, so, which I think is the point. So, on that note, Bob, do you have your favorite motion?
Motion adjourned.
Okay, all right, so Jeremy will say.
Yes.
Jeff.
Yes.
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 And Amanda?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes, so thank you all very much. Until next time.